broke.
You've seen the intro, you've seen the problem. I bent the motherboard pins on this CPU. Nope, no, this is not a Ryzen. I've bent the motherboard pins on this Intel socketed motherboard. Stupid, yes, but easy to fix. Well, for me. Probably not for others, but still. The solution is simple, is to get a new motherboard. But then I thought to myself, lots of motherboards out there, especially the 6000 and 7000 series motherboards. I'm going by CPU series, not motherboard series. The chips, I'll just link the chipsets. Anyways, they sell for like 50. And I thought, wow, I could buy a new i3 with this money. So I did. And what about a motherboard? So I did again. But first, let's unbox this i3. Included with its own cooler. I've never actually touched a Intel CPU cooler before. This is my first ever Intel stock cooler. Whoa boy. It's glorious. How the hell does this thing even screw down? But since what I installed originally is a Thermalright cooler, we might be able to reuse it. But first, let's use the stock cooler first. Where the hell is it? There it is. In all glory, the i3 12100F. Unlike its older brothers, the 14th series i9s, this one won't rust and won't have stability issues. Well, because it's a 12th gen and it's an i3. And to people thinking of buying the 15 series that's not even named that, just go with the 12 series. They're like the last good Intel before, you know, the whole corrosion, instability, you know, Gamer's Nexus. The cheapest motherboard on Amazon. The lowest chipset. Which will be perfect for this i3. But anything else, I would just recommend something higher. Metal I/O. SATA connections. Instructions. Actually, keep that. The motherboard itself, in all her glory. It's a little guy. Look at him. He's smaller. He's smaller than the board in here. And by the looks of the PCIe positioning, this won't fit in an ITX case. I mean, without slamming it into, but this won't fit. Like, naturally. Alright. What? TPM. Alright. The motherboard itself is not much different, other than the stand-up CMOS, which I find kind of cool. Flimsy VRMs. I'm not smart enough to know how many phases that is, but I'm smart enough to know that's that's very weak, and anything else put in here will suffer. 2 channels of RAM. You never need more. And some basic SATA connections. I mean, this could pass for a budget PC. That's what I'm saying. Wow, this is surprisingly flimsy. I think there's a reason why people play Comtech frames, but we don't need it for an i3. Solid. My huge concern for the Intel stock cooler is why didn't they just do the AMD route and, you know, use screwing mounts? I mean, sure, it might have cost less if they just had it like this because you don't need a backplate. But this, it's wiggling. Never mind, I just had it in wrong.
Originally, I was talking during this whole build, but it got way too long that I think it wasn't worth keeping in, so I'll just skip to any important bits. Yep, I'm bringing back the good old RX 460 in this scene. And my big issue with it now is that it just doesn't have enough VRAM. I mean, some tech YouTubers are going to recommend it, but I wouldn't recommend the 2GB variant, as some of the games like Forza Horizon, it runs, it just doesn't run happily the minute it starts using 2GB of VRAM. I would recommend getting an RX 580, 550, but this is just the 500 series of Radeon. There are much better cards out there, but it all blends down to 2 factors: your budget and the age of the system you're using. Okay, this is taking too long. I'm just gonna skip ahead to the Cinebench test. And the i3 scores 7,603 points. That's faster than a 7700K, but slower than a Ryzen 7. The AM4 platform is still very relevant and still very good, but that doesn't mean you should not give future sockets a chance. What am I saying? To put it simple, I wouldn't recommend the 1700 Intel sockets. I mean, 12th gen's okay, 13 and 14 gen, oh, that's a big mess. So if you want to upgrade from an i3 to an i7, well, ugh, that's that's the best way I can describe it. And I know they fixed it, but still, ugh. And not to mention the motherboard in this video, if you're going to buy something similar in size, the VRMs are going to suffer. So your best choice would have been just to get an AM5 motherboard, because they're not they're kind of pricey, but they're worth the price. Like, I personally run a 7600X and it's done me pretty well. Albeit, my room heats up very fast with the 7600X. Now, on to the focus of the i3. I wouldn't call this benchmark the best of the i3. Right now, it's being bottlenecked by the 4600. As you can see, that 2 gigabytes of VRAM is not enough, and it's stuttering. Like, not horribly. Forza is known for being good, well optimized, but it's struggling. In World of Warships, you can tone down these settings to use less than 2 gigabytes of VRAM, as World of Warships seems to be a more CPU intensive game. Although, again, the RX 460 being the main bottleneck, the i3 is barely doing anything, while the 460 is just dying. And I don't mean that to dramatize how poor the RX 460 is. I mean it's dying at 75 Celsius. The little HP cooler design is not exactly the best for it. So, and I know that other cards exist, like the 7600 and 6650 XT. Well, the 6600 XT, this pricing is just a little inconsistent, and the 7600 is... I'd recommend the 7600 if you got the cash. But for right now, I feel like the 6600 is a good middle ground. We don't see any big jumps, but that's because I changed the setting from low to ultra in Forza Horizon. We're now utilizing more than 2 gigabytes, and we're freshly using almost 7 gigabytes of video memory. Obviously, Forza Horizon can use more, but this is the 6600. We only have 8 gigabytes. But what it lacks in video memory, it makes up in GPU muscle. Bringing back the 1070's Ultra settings I did a while back, the 6600 seems to outperform it in the averages, but the 1070 for some reason has the better 1% lows. Could be due to the CPU I was using with the 1070, or the part of the map I was playing in for. But either way, the 6600 is definitely going to be faster than 1070. Or one factor could be playing in is that the 1070 was being tested with a 6-core CPU, and the 6600 was running with a quad-core. Even though cores aren't everything, the i3 is definitely faster than this 8th gen i5. Physical cores are definitely going to have more brute muscle. Originally, I was gonna change it to very high on World of Warships, but seeing how medium performed, the CPU and GPU are being put under the test decently, and I decided that was a good point. In World of Warships, it's a pretty smooth experience. I mean, World of Warships, it's not really laggy. It can run on almost a potato. The main difference is going to be texture quality. World of Warships tends to have some really realistic ships depending on what setting you're using. Well, my final thoughts are about the motherboard and i3.
I don't got much for the RX 6600. I've already covered that. Well, I would usually recommend older CPUs and older GPUs because they work fine. This is a little more dip into the more modern low end. What I did reuse was the power supply from my original $200 build, and I'm gonna be honest, horrible. My main fear was this old thing, this old Antec power supply was just gonna die on me running this. I mean, it's not like it's gonna draw like a full 600 watts, but still, the fear was there. Now, as we focus back onto the motherboard, it's got no M.2 slots. None at all. It's just too, I don't know, ASRock designed this. I guess it was too cheap, or just not worth it. But to be honest, if you're going this cheap of a motherboard that's not even ITX, not even full MATX, you would not need an NVMe. SATA works fine. Focusing on the i3, all I can describe it is, while it is kind of impressive that i3s are getting the same configuration as old i7s, the 4 cores and 8 threads, it's okay. But I would recommend those old i7s because they can be slightly cheaper in CPU with motherboard bundles on eBay. But the benefit of getting a newer motherboard and newer CPU could mean upgrade path, even though upgrade path is horrible for this socket. You get access to PCIe 4.0, which doesn't sound like much, but in the later tests, when I switched this to 3.0 in a different video, we're gonna see how much bigger of a gap we can get when we switch PCIe speeds. Or just watch my RTX 4060 versus 6600. Apparently, I was bottlenecked by PCIe speeds, and I need to redo that one day. Leave a like if you liked the video. Leave a dislike if you didn't like the video. And make sure to leave a comment. Feedback is appreciated.